Hello everybody, this is Adrian back at it again with another Commander Deck Tech video. This time we're going to be looking at Brudiclad, Telchor Engineer. Now, at the end of the video we'll talk about this, but this is a casual version of Brudiclad. This is no fast mana, no free spells, okay? This is casual, but because this deck does have a lot of really great cards that you can put in it, all of which are right here, or some of which are right here, I should say. We will be talking about those at the end of the video. So if you're like, hey, why isn't there a Soul Ring in this deck? Why isn't there a Dockside in this deck? It's because I'm playing the casual version with my play group, not the jacked up version of it, okay? So we're going to talk about that soon. But we'll save that to the end. Let's talk about Brudiclad, Telchor Engineer. Now, this creature, I'm not sure, let's just call it a he. Let's say he makes a token on every combat. It's a 2/1, and then you can turn all of your tokens into a copy of that token. It is a mirror token, but interestingly, those tokens are going to become copies, but they're not going to enter the battlefield. So that's something you got to keep in mind. But it does give all your creature tokens haste, and it is a 4/4. It is 6 mana, which is why the fast mana can be good in a more busted version of this deck. All right, so unlike my last video, I actually have all these cards sorted by converted mana cost. So we're going to talk about the most expensive cards mana-wise in the deck first, and then we are going to work backwards from that. So, first up, we have Blasphemous Act. Yeah, it's technically the most expensive card in the deck because it's 9 mana, although it's going to be cheaper for each creature on the battlefield. So this is usually going to be like 1 or 2 mana, 3 mana to wipe the board, essentially. Next up, we also have another card that isn't actually 7 mana, but this one is Junkwinder. It's great. It has affinity for tokens. Whenever a creature token enters, or actually whenever any token enters the battlefield, you're going to tap target non-land permanent an opponent controls, and it's not going to untap. So this is great for locking down the board. You know, the tokens that you make copies of or whatever are not going to enter the battlefield, but that 2/1 is going to enter the battlefield at least every turn that you have your commander out. And this really, really likes it when you make tokens because that tap ability will save your butt a lot. Speaking of tokens, we also have Mirror Battlesphere. You're going to be paying full price for this thing more often than not, but it is really good. It makes 4 1/1 mirrors when it comes in, and then it has an attack thing that you can do, but mostly you just want to make the mirrors. Next up, we've got Ovika, the Goliath. It has flying. It's a 6/6. It's got ward. The ward is really nice because it kind of helps make sure that it stays alive. Because you're usually not going to be able to cast this and then also do something else in the same turn. But if you get to untap with this thing, you can kind of go crazy. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you're going to make a bunch of goblins where X is the converted mana cost of that spell. So like, let's say, you know, you cast your expensive planeswalkers that we're about to talk about. You're going to get a bunch of 1/1s. And then you can change them into better tokens if you have better options to do that. So that card's great. Definitely don't sleep on it. Chandra Flamecaller. This is a Chandra creature, and she makes 2 3/1s. She can also kind of do like a little board wipe and some draw, but you're mostly just going to make the 3/1s and either turn all of your 1/1s or whatever into the 3/1s, or you are going to turn those 3/1s into something better if you have the option to. Next up, we've got Ugin the Ineffable. This card's really good. That destroy target permanent mode is really nice because, we're not in green or black or white because, we're an Izzet tech. We are limited somewhat with our removal, so that is really nice. And the uptick ability is kind of like a weird way to draw cards, but it also makes a token. And, this colorless spells cost 2 less to cast is also pretty good sometimes. 5 mana spells here. We got Perplexing Test. This is kind of like a variation on Evacuation. You're really never going to pick that first mode, but you are going to pick the return all non-token creatures to their owner's hands a lot. That's going to be kind of like a one-sided board wipe if you're going buck wild with tokens. Next up, we got Burn Down the House. This is a great board wipe. It will deal 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, but you can also, in a pinch, you can make 3 1/1 devils that they deal 1 damage when they die. Now, it's not as good as Blasphemous Act. This does 13, this only does 5, and this is usually going to be like 2 mana or 1 mana. But Blasphemous Act is never going to make you 3 1/1 devils, and this will sometimes do that. Next up, we got Siege Gang Commander. Speaking of 3/11s, this guy also makes 3/11s. This time they're goblins. Siege Gang Commander is great. It's very efficient, so we're obviously going to be running that. Next up, we've got, this is Sarkhan. In take one of this video, I call him Soren, but I'm actually doing a second take because I screwed up so much. This is, of course, the Japanese anime version. It looks really cool, but unfortunately we can't read it because I don't know how to read Japanese. But I just know what the card does. So this line right here, it says, all of your dragons deal damage to creatures when they attack you. 1 damage for each dragon you have. If you make a dragon token and then you make a bunch of them in, a bunch of your other tokens into the dragon tokens, that can give you like a shield from attacks. This ability right here turns him into a dragon, not a token, unfortunately. But his last ability, -3, which you can use right away when he comes out, it will make you a 4/4 dragon token, which is very, very nice. A lot of the time, we're going to make a bunch of tokens, and then we're going to turn them all into dragons, and we're going to win the game. These 2 cards I'm going to talk about at once because they are like best bros. This is a combo. If you get both of these cards out, you make a copy of this, it untaps this, and you just do that forever, and you win the game. We would not be running this card if we weren't running this card because this card doesn't really have any other synergy with the deck, but it's pretty cool to run it with your Kiki Jiki. You might as well. I mean, it's just 1 card. Kiki is great, though. It does make tokens of all of our non-legendary creatures, like Siege Gang Commander. You're going to make a token of your Siege Gang and get 3 more 1/1s. That's nuts. Even more crazy would be copying your Mirror Battlesphere. So Kiki is just a great card in general, but it's really nice because if you make a token, let's say you make a copy of your Mirror Battlesphere, well, you're going to get 4 1/1s, and then you can turn all those mirrors and the mirror you make for your turn into the token copy of your Mirror Battlesphere. So now instead of a bunch of 1/1s, you have like a bajillion Mirror Battlespheres, and that's going to be actually insane, okay? So this is just a great card. But you probably knew that already. Mechanized Production. Now, don't worry about this part down here. You can win the game with it. You can enchant an artifact, and each upkeep you're going to make a token that's a copy of that enchanted artifact. It's kind of nice because you can stick it on an artifact that's not a token, and now boom, you've got tokens of it, and you can turn all your other dudes into it, like your Mirror Battlesphere. And you can realistically make 8 or more tokens and win the game with this, but it's not going to come up all that often. We're just playing it for value. Asinine Antics. This card is kind of crazy. It's 4 mana. It's a sorcery, but you can pay it for 6, and it will be instant speed. For each creature your opponents control, you're going to make a Cursed Roll token attached to that creature. It just turns it into a 1/1. It still has all of its abilities, unfortunately, but it is going to be a 1/1. Now, the crazy thing is all those roll tokens. Let's say you're playing against 3 players and they all have 4 creatures, okay? You're going to make 12 1/1 roll tokens. Well, you can turn all of those into creatures. Now, they will, of course, fall off, but that is something you can do with this, and it's just a really good way to make a bunch of tokens in a hurry. So that's a really cool card, and it's very cheap to buy, too. I think it's like less than $1. Rite of Replication, EDH Classic. You're going to make a copy of a token. You're going to make a token that's a copy of a creature, on the battlefield. This is nice because you can make copies of other people's stuff and then turn all of your creatures into that thing. So let's say your opponent has like, I don't know, like a Consecrated Sphinx or something out. Yeah, it's going to be pretty crazy to make all of your tokens into that. Leyline of Anticipation. It is kind of nice to play our stuff at instant speed. We don't run a whole lot of instant speed stuff because our deck is kind of like a janky token deck, obviously. So, yeah, we want to run that. And if it's in your opening hand, you get to play it for free, which is sweet. Master of Waves, it's going to make a bunch of 1/0 tokens when it comes into play equal to your devotion to blue. And then it has protection from red. And he's going to pump all of your elemental tokens basically by 1/1. He's kind of cool because he can make multiple tokens when he comes into play, and then you can turn those tokens into better tokens. Perforos, we do make a lot of tokens. It does 2 damage every time another creature enters to each opponent, which is sweet, and then you can pump your creatures with it. Now, again, when you make copies, they don't re-enter the battlefield. That's not how it works. But we're making so many creature tokens on the fly that I think it's still very much worth it. Hate Mirage. This card is kind of cool. It is a sorcery, and you're going to pick 2 target creatures you don't control, and then you make token copies of them, and then you get rid of them at the end of turn. But it's another way that you can make copies of creatures that aren't tokens, and if your opponents are playing some really powerful creatures, make 2 copies of those, and then turn all your other tokens into those. And although you have to get rid of the tokens from this, you don't have to get rid of the copies that you make of it, which is pretty cool. Coastal Piracy, whenever you hit a player with your creatures, you're going to draw a card. That's pretty good, obviously, because we run a lot of creatures in this deck. Urza. Man, that's a good card, right? This ability right here is why we're playing the card. This is nice enough that you can tap things for blue, but we're playing this to get the 0/0 construct guy because that is super, 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 super important to this deck. A lot of the way that you're going to win is by making that token and making all your other guys into a copy of it, and you're going to have like 100 power on the board. Speaking of which, Karn, we are playing this just because it also makes that exact same token. That's how important it is. We're going to play a couple different ways to make that. The Elder Dragon War, this has a lot of words on it, but basically you can play it and read ahead to this chapter, which is the most important, where you make the 4/4 red dragon. If this was 4 mana, make a 4/4 red dragon token, we would still play it, but it still has all this other stuff on it, which just kind of makes it better. So it doesn't come up a lot of the time, but you can do it. Chrome Host Seed Shark. This is a kind of cool card. When you cast non-creature spells, you're going to incubate, where X is that spell's mana value. So you're going to get these tokens that actually have 1/1 counters on them. And then if you turn them into your 2/1 mirrors, let's say, well, they're still going to have those 1/1 counters on it. So like, let's say you have this out, you play this, well, you're going to get a 4/4 incubator, and then you're going to make this dragon, and then you're going to turn all your stuff into that dragon, and then, yeah, you can kind of see how it goes crazy. So this is pretty cool because the tokens actually have counters on them, and they get to keep the counters when you change them into something else, which is really sweet. Chaos Warp, I don't really need to explain this. It's a red card. It's removal. It's great. You should run it in all your red decks. Hordling Outburst, I got the cool F&M promo here. It makes 3 1/1 goblins. I mean, they're tokens. That's exactly what we want with this deck because we want to make those goblins and turn them into something better, right? Seasoned Pyromancer, this helps you draw cards, filter through the deck a little bit. It also makes tokens, and it can make tokens from the graveyard, so obviously we're going to be playing that. Worldwaker Helm, if you make 1 or more artifact tokens, which we are going to be making every turn, at least 1 with that guy, you get to make those tokens and a map token, and then you can turn that map token into a better token later on. And then you can also copy tokens with it too. So this is just all around a really good card for the deck. Shark Typhoon, I actually won this at the Standard Showdown. I got top 8 at the Store Championship thing. So when you cast your non-creature spells, you're going to get a big shark token for them. And you can also cycle it to make the shark token too. This is very similar to the Chrome Host Seed Shark. I think it's kind of intentional in that the Seed Shark is a reference to this card, of course. But yeah, this is a great card. It makes the big tokens, and then you can turn your other guys into copies of them. Prismari Command. This is a removal spell that makes a token, so we're going to run it. Simulacrum Synthesizer. This is a great card. Whenever you play another artifact with mana value 3 or greater, you're going to get that very, very useful construct token. Now, keep in mind, that is an artifact with converted mana cost 3 or greater, so it's automatically going to trigger this. And that's very important. That construct token, we play a lot of cards just to get that because it's very, very good in this deck. Fable of the Mirror Breaker. This is just a nuts card all around. It makes a token, and then that token makes more tokens. This card is crazy, especially when you flip it. And it's kind of like a callback to Kiki Jiki on this back half. Not as good because you have to pay mana for it, but yeah, this card is nuts. Definitely running that card all the time. Twin Flame, again, this is going to make a token that is a copy of a creature. Very similar to Hate Mirage, but you can use this on your own creatures. Also, it's probably worth noting that if you want to play a little bit more of a competitive version of this deck, there are a lot of combos with this. Creatures that enter the battlefield and copy spells. I'm not running those. I don't think In this deck, I'm not 100%. I don't think I'm running any of them, though. But that is something to keep in mind. Like Dual Caster Mage goes infinite with that. And if you want to piss your friends off or win a little bit easier, you can do that. Resculpt, exile target artifact or creature, and then they're going to get a 4/4 blue and red token. We can use this on our opponent's stuff if they have something really scary, or we can use it on one of our own creatures to make all of our other tokens into 4/4s, which sometimes we're going to do that. Counterspell, it counters a spell. That's all you need to know. Is it Signet? It's ramp. Our general is 6 mana. We need to run ramp. Thought Vessel, same thing. Blue Sun's Twilight, you're going to gain control of a creature. But if you pay 5 or more mana, you're going to make a token that's a copy of that creature too. So if you're stealing somebody's mana dork, you can make a bunch of copies of it. That's pretty funny. Third Path, Iconoclast. It's kind of similar to another older card, Young Pyromancer. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you're going to make 1/1s, and then you can turn those 1/1s into better creatures. Lightning Greaves, we really don't target things very much, especially not our own general. So we want to put this on our general as fast as we can. Cyclonic Rift, it's, we're running blue, so we're running Cyclonic Rift. Expressive Iteration, this is a good draw spell. It is very nice because you can get a lot of good selection with it. You usually don't want to play it on turn 2 because ideally you're putting a non-land card in your hand and exiling a land and then playing that land for turn. So, play it on turn 3 or later, especially if you haven't hit your land drop yet. Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone. Sorry, I announced them in the reverse order. But anyway, these and this are all pretty boring. They tap for mana. We need to run a lot of those. Storm Chaser's Talent. This is a new card. When it enters, we're going to make a 1/1 Otter with Prowess. And, we do run some instants and sorcery, so that's kind of nice. And then the last mode, it makes a bunch of otters when we cast things, which is pretty cool. Mostly this is just 1 mana, make a token, which can be pretty cool. Brainstorm, draws cards, card selections. Brainstorm, you know what that does. Stubborn Denial, this is a nice counter spell because, like I said, we're in a little bit more of a casual environment, so we're not running free counters. But our guy is a 4/4, so that means that this will be a straight-up counter spell if without them having to pay any mana if we have our general out. So this is a card where if you're running like Forcible and stuff, you can get away with cutting that for sure, but not in this deck because this is the casual version. Gamble, this one is also in a foreign language, but the what Gamble does. It searches for a card, and then you randomly select a card and discard it from your hand. A lot of the times, unfortunately, luck of the draw, you might discard the thing that you search for, which blows, but whatever. Tempt with Vengeance. You're going to make a bunch of 1/1s, and they have haste, and then each opponent can do the same. And for each opponent that does it, you get even more 1/1s. Most of your friends aren't going to be stupid enough to fall for this more than once, because if you get 5 1/1s and somebody's like, I want 5 1/1s, then you're actually going to get 10 1/1s, which is just crazy with your general. So you're not usually going to get that more than once. Galvanic Blast, this is a nice card. I'm a big believer in like Lightning Bolt and stuff in 1 mana removal like Fatal Push in EDH. I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. But a lot of times we are going to have Metalcraft. We run a lot of artifacts, including our general and a lot of the tokens and a lot of the mana rocks and all that good stuff. So a lot of times that's just going to be 1 mana 4 damage, which is great. Speaking of artifacts, Skull Clamp, can't really go wrong with that. You turn your 1/1s in for 2 cards each, really good. Pongify, you're going to destroy a creature, and its controller gets a 3/3. You can technically hit your own guys with that, but you're probably going to be using it on your opponent's stuff. Speaking of which, the sister card to that is Rapid Hybridization. It basically does the same thing, except this makes a monkey, and this makes a frog lizard, but they are basically the exact same thing. We also run Wayfarer's Bauble, just a good way to get your ramp going early. Hard Evidence, this card is great. It makes 2 tokens for the low cost of 1 mana, and it's not really going to get any better than that for this. This also makes 2 tokens for 1 mana, but you're more than likely going to be using it on your opponent's stuff. It's good. It's just a nice little counter spell. you know, if you're not losing the game because you countered their thing, it's kind of nice to just give them 2 treasures. And it's got the amazing cat art. And if you watched my first video, you know that I love cats. Song of Totentans. It's very, very similar to Tempt with Vengeance, but this one just makes the tokens for you. It makes a bunch of rat tokens, and then you can turn all those rats into something better, like a dragon. Gleeful Demolition, you're going to destroy an artifact, and if you control that artifact, you get to make 3 1/1 goblins. A lot of times it's worth blowing up your own mirrors or whatever to get the 3 1/1s, but it also has a nice fail case where you could just destroy somebody's artifact for 1 mana and they don't get any of the tokens out of it, which is really cool. Retrofitter Foundry, this kind of does everything. It makes tokens, that's exactly what you want. Pact of the Titan, this card is really bad because although it is free, you get a 4/4 for free. Wow, it seems really good. But on the beginning of your next upkeep, you have to pay 5 mana, and if you don't, you lose the game. But if you're like got a bunch of 1/1s and you're turning all of them into 4/4s and winning the game that turn, you're going to be pretty happy about that. Next, we will go through the lands very, very, very quickly as I can. We run a bunch of basic islands and a bunch of basic mountains. There's another basic island. We're running Training Center. That's a dual land. We'll go ahead and talk about the effect lands at the end. More basics, another island, another mountain. We'll talk about the effect lands at the end. Dual land, Snarl. The Snarls are kind of bad, but, you know, a couple more islands. Fiery Islet. It's going to draw you a card sometimes. Mountain. Bunch more basic lands. There's like 4 of them right there. So we'll get rid of all those. Command Tower, because we're playing Commander. We'll talk about effect lands later. I have this cool gold-bordered Reflecting Pool. You really don't need Reflecting Pool, but it's pretty cool that I have the gold-bordered one. Stormcarved Coast, that's just dual lands. Thundering Falls, that's just a dual land. Basic lands. Mana Confluence. Castle Vantress is an effect land, so we'll talk about that later. Sulphur Falls, a couple more mountains. A Scalding Tarn. Lava Glide Pathway. And the actual other side of it. River Glide Pathway. Spire Bluff Canal. Shivan Reef. Some more basics. And Steam Vents. So let's talk about the lands that actually do stuff other than tap for mana. There are a few of them, so we'll go through them in turn. Castle Vantress, kind of a free roll. You're going to get to scry 2. If you have a Castle Embereth, which I just don't have, it's also worth it because of that pumping ability. I just don't happen to have one of those right now. Den of the Bugbear. This is a creature land, and it will make a 1/1 when it attacks. You could probably swap that out for Castle Embereth, honestly. Desolate Lighthouse. This is nice. You know, our color requirements aren't crazy in this deck, so we can get away with playing a couple of these kind of lands, and going through the deck is kind of nice, looting. We don't run a ton of MDFCs. We could probably be running more, to be quite honest with you, but we do run Valakut Awakening. Putting cards on the bottom, drawing new cards is always going to be pretty good. Reliquary Tower, we do have ways to draw cards, and giving no maximum hand size is pretty good. We've got Odawara, the Flying City or whatever it's called. This is the one where you can pay 4 and bounce something by discarding this card. It's kind of like a removal spell, but it's also a land, which is great. Sokenzan has a lot of synergy with the deck. You're going to make 2 1/1s, and it's pretty good because it's a land, and sometimes it makes 2 1/1s. And the best land in the deck, unfortunately, it is kind of an expensive card, but by far it is the best land in the deck. Yes, it is Urza's Saga. It, you know, taps for colorless, but you can pay 2 mana and make that amazing construct token. And then when it goes away at the end of the 3rd chapter, you can go and get an artifact with converted mana cost 0 or 1. Now, we do have a bunch of those. We have Retrofitter Foundry. That's something you can get with it. We have Wayfarer's Bauble. That's another thing you can get with it. Skull Clamp. So we've got some crazy heavy hitters. If you are playing the more powerful version of the deck, you're going to have more of these types of cards, especially like 0 mana rocks and stuff. But even in the not so powerful version of the deck, these 3 cards are really good. You know, you're not usually going to get that, but you can if you need to. But just these 2 cards are nuts. Getting to be able to tutor these out and put them right on the battlefield is great. So Unfortunately, it's one of the more expensive cards in the budget version of the deck, but it's totally worth it, and you need it in the deck. Definitely have to get one, and if you can't afford one, then just proxy it. All right, so that's the deck tech. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, Adrian, where are all the good cards in the deck? Well, like I mentioned in my other video, I play in a casual play group, and once a month we have a more powerful night where we play with more powerful cards, but mostly we play with less powerful cards. So that's why you didn't see any Soul Rings, you didn't see any Mana Crypts, you didn't see any of that stuff. So I didn't grab all the stuff that you could put in here that would be more powerful, but I just kind of grabbed some of it. So more powerful mana rocks. You got your Soul Rings, but also Jeweled Lotus and Ancient Tomb. Jeweled Lotus is great in this deck because our general costs 6 mana, which is a lot. So with this, you can play it really early. And of course, Ancient Tomb is just going to be good because you're going to tap it for 2 and not really care about the life loss. This is a great card, Dockside Extortionist, but it is really, really powerful. And unfortunately, it doesn't always fit in with the more casual play groups, so I cut that in the less powerful version of the deck. There are a lot of free spells that you can run that protect your general, which is extremely important. So like Force of Will, which I happen to have a foil of, and Deflecting Swat are both really strong cards. And I think there's a cat over there. Hey, buddy. Anyway, Deflecting Swat is a really strong card, but like I said, we're running a little bit more casual here. And then the last group of cards that you could put in your deck, if you have a casual play group and they don't mind it, is, you got your Heuristic Study. I happen to have the really, really cool one, but Mystic Remora as well. These cards I don't run in the casual version because, it's just kind of like, Heuristic Study. So I don't run them in the powerful version. But if you're running a more powerful version of the deck, I highly recommend all of these cards and more. You should also probably run Soul Ring, which I don't run in the less powerful version of the deck. But you should run all those cards and probably some more. And you can cut some of the crappier cards out of the deck, like the Stubborn Denial and stuff like that. But anyway, I think we should go to a close here because this video is like a half-hour long, which is crazy. But hope you enjoyed it. I have a bunch more Commander decks, so I'll be filming more videos like this hopefully very soon. Bye-bye.